Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. Do me a favor, please subscribe if you haven't already. I know what you need, some more rock and read. Today we will pick up where we left off with Chapter 4 of Elvis and Me, written by his wife, Priscilla Presley. Here we go. As the weeks passed, school became an unbearable chore. After getting to bed so late, I found it difficult to rise at 7 and almost impossible to concentrate. But I knew that if I ever complained about being too tired or was late for school, my parents would use the fact to put a stop to my seeing Elvis. My study habits became worse. I was failing algebra and German, and barely passing history and English. At the end of the fall semester, I altered the D- grade on my report card to a B+, praying my father would never consult the teacher. I kept telling myself that I would do better, that I'd catch up, but my concentration was totally on Elvis. One night when I went to see him, I fell asleep while waiting for him to finish his karate class. When he came downstairs and saw how exhausted I was, he asked, "Priscilla, how many hours of sleep are you getting?" After a second I said, "About 4 or 5 hours a night, but I'll be fine," I added quickly. "I'm just a little extra tired tonight because we had some tests at school today." Elvis looked thoughtful and then said, "Come upstairs a minute. I have something for you." He led me up to his room, where he placed a handful of small white pills in the palm of my hand. "I want you to take these. They'll help you stay awake during the day. Just take one when you feel a little drowsy. No more than one, though, or you'll be doing handstands down the hallway." "What are they?" I asked. "You don't need to know what they are. They give them to us when we go on maneuvers. If I didn't have them, I'd never make it through the day myself. But it's okay. They're safe," he told me. "Put them away, and don't tell anyone you have them, and don't take them every day. Just when you need a little more energy." Elvis honestly thought he was doing me a favor by giving me the pills, and I'm sure the thought never entered his mind that they could be harmful to him or me. I didn't take the pills. I put them in a small box with various items I had started to collect, such as cigar holders and little personal notes he had given me, and hid the box in a drawer. Later I learned that the pills were dexedrine, which Elvis had first discovered in the army. A sergeant had given several men pills to help them stay awake while on guard duty. Elvis, who was accustomed to living the life of an entertainer and who despised rising at dawn, began taking the pills to get him through the long, dreary hours of army life. He told me he had begun taking sleeping pills shortly before he had been drafted. He dreaded insomnia and feared sleepwalking, which had plagued him periodically since childhood. In fact, as a boy, he had once sleepwalked straight out of his apartment, dressed only in his underwear. A neighbor woke him, and embarrassed, he ran back into the house. Another time, he nearly fell out of a window. Consequently, to avoid accidents, he slept with his parents until he was grown, and he feared his sleepwalking habit for the rest of his life. It was one of the reasons he usually had someone sleeping with him. Years later, I learned that someone had been employed in Germany to watch over him throughout the night. It was already Christmas 1959, and I had no idea what to get Elvis. I walked through the crowded streets of Wiesbaden, window shopping, trying to get ideas. Picking out gifts for the family had always been easy, since we always knew exactly what was wanted or needed. In fact, we often made our gifts for one another. On this occasion, my father gave me $35 to spend on Elvis, and it seemed a vast amount to me when I set out on this freezing cold day. I was disabused of the notion when I priced a beautiful handmade cigar box with porcelain outlining a decorative design. Elvis, a cigar smoker, would have loved it. But after the shopkeeper told me the price, 650 Deutsch marks, or $155, all I walked out with was my expensive taste. It was snowing heavily, and I hurried into another shop, this one full of bright toys, including a solidly built toy German train that I could imagine Elvis instantly setting up in his living room. But the train cost 2,000 Deutsch marks. Heading home in the dark, on the verge of tears, I spotted a music store where a pair of bongo drums inlaid with gleaming brass were displayed in the window. They were $40, but the clerk took mercy on me and sold them for $35. As I headed home, I was beset by 1,000 doubts, convinced that the drums were the least romantic of gifts. I must have asked Joe Esposito and Lamar 20 times if they thought the drums were appropriate. "Oh, sure," Joe said. "Anything you give him, he'll like." I still wasn't convinced. On the night we exchanged gifts, Elvis emerged from his dad's room and drew me to one corner of the living room, where he handed me a small wrapped box. In it, a delicate gold watch with a diamond set on the lid, and a ring with a pearl bracketed by 2 diamonds. I had never owned anything so beautiful, nor had any smile ever warmed me as Elvis's did then. "I'll cherish these forever," I told him, and he made me put them on right away and took me around to show everyone. I waited as long as possible to give Elvis my present. Laughing, he said, "Bongos! Just what I always wanted!" Elvis could see that I didn't believe him. He was better at giving than receiving. "Charlie," he persisted, "didn't I need some bongos?" Motioning for me to sit next to him at the piano, he started playing "I'll Be Home for Christmas" with such emotion that I couldn't look up for fear he'd see I was crying. When at last I couldn't resist meeting his eyes, I saw that he too was holding back tears. It was not until many days later that I discovered a whole closet full of bongo drums, mine not included, in the basement. That my white elephants had not been consigned to dark oblivion, but stood prominently displayed beside his guitar, made me love him all the more. As the days passed, I began to dread the day of Elvis's departure. By January, he was already packing, and each night I spent with him became more precious than the one before. Then, just as the weather turned freezing cold, Elvis was sent out on field maneuvers for 10 days, and if there was anything Elvis hated, it was having to sleep outside on the frozen ground. The morning after he left, it began to snow, and by afternoon, it was a blizzard. As Michelle and I were driving home from school with my mother, I turned on the radio, just in time to hear a late breaking news bulletin. "Sorry to interrupt, folks, but it was just reported that Corporal Elvis Presley has been rushed from field maneuvers to a hospital in Frankfurt, suffering from an acute attack of tonsillitis. Elvis, if you're listening, we all hope you get well real soon." Frantic with worry, I called the hospital, hoping to learn more about his condition. To my surprise, when the operator heard my name, she put me right through, saying Corporal Presley had left word to do so if I called. "I'm a sick man, little one," Elvis rasped. "I need you by my side. If it's okay with your folks, I'll send Lamar for you right now." Of course, my parents gave me permission to go to the hospital, and an hour later I entered his room just as the nurse was leaving. Elvis was propped up in bed with a thermometer in his mouth, surrounded by dozens of floral arrangements. The moment the nurse was gone, Elvis took the thermometer out of his mouth, lit a match, and carefully held it under the thermometer. Then he stuck the thermometer back in his mouth and slumped down on the bed just as the door opened and the nurse returned, carrying in even more flowers. Smiling warmly to her famous patient, she took the thermometer out of Elvis's mouth, looked at it, and gasped, 103! Why, Elvis, you're really sick. I'm afraid you'll have to stay here at least a week. Elvis nodded mutely as the nurse fluffed up his pillows, filled his water glass, and left the room. Then he burst out laughing, jumped out of bed, and took me in his arms. He despised maneuvers, and since the weather was so bad and everyone was so worried about his voice, his answer was tonsillitis. Already susceptible to catching colds, Elvis learned to dramatize his sickness with a little flick of a match. Well, that's the end of chapter 4. Let me know what you thought of this chapter in the comments below. That does it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Till then, rock on.